The Ascent is 7 episodes after the ship, and again will feature our heroes facing being stranded in a life-or-death situation. Well, that crap can wait. We're going to start with the B-plot instead, which is the fact that Jake will be rooming with Nog, who has come back from the Academy to do field studies on DS9. As discussed, the character of Jake was created for Sisko, to add to the new complexity of a commander who is also a single father. Having your child move out, even just to another part of the same station, that's not easy. My kids turn 18 next month, and I am torn between my desire for them to stay forever and my knowledge that, as part of the cycle of life, one needs to accept that them moving on is the only way I can clear their shit out of there and finally put a pool table in here. Rum has already had to deal with Nog leaving, so he's actually excited because this whole thing means that Nog will be nearby. And joining in that celebration is Quark, who is so overcome with joy he can hardly stop scowling. But Odo comes by to dampen even his spirits. Seems that Quark has been summoned before a grand jury, and given the chance to see Quark finally put on trial for his very defenses, Odo is going to bring him there personally. It's a pity he's no longer a changeling, otherwise I'm sure he'd sit in court with his hand turned into a big foam #1 and wave a little pennant in appreciation of the proceedings. So it's a long, long trip for these two, and naturally Quark, being a social fellow, tries to do something with Odo, but Odo's resistance to social engagement, well, would impress even a hermit, actually. So Quark settles for insulting him. It's a good first taste of their dynamic. These two may be in opposition, but their adversarial qualities are not actually hostile. Odo's flat out saying he wouldn't play any game with Quark, Quark laying out why Odo is such a sourpuss, and this is not an act. But it's not born from loathing either. To suggest they're frenemies would be excessive, but they're clearly not enemies either. That relationship will make a very different kind of experience compared to the pressure cooker of the ship, because these two are not straightforward at all.
Her hands moved to the brooch at her throat. She unclasped it, and the cloak fell from her shoulders. Her wet skin glistening in the moonlight.
I wonder what the me in the mid-90s who watched this episode originally would say if he knew that I was going to have to split this erotic scene solely to satisfy the whims of a robot.
Lightning flashed, and heaven's thunder roared in rhythm with the beating of their hearts.
All right, enough.
Odo, I take it all back. You're obviously a lot more complicated than I thought.
This is a good example of what I mean. If Quark really despised Odo, he could embarrass the crap out of him, needle him until Odo wanted to beam him out into space. Instead, you get the sense that Odo has actually gone up in Quark's eyes a little, though that is the only thought that could be worse for Odo than being teased by Quark. Back on DS9, Nog and Jake are happy in their bachelor pad, but because this is a B-plot, it's going to have to move quickly and too predictable. Nog is still acting like he's super cadet, so the place has to be clean enough to manufacture hard drives in here, and it's early shut-eye for a morning visit to the gym instead of playing games into the wee hours.
Muscles, Jake! You know, those things that are supposed to go between your bones and your skin?
I've heard of them.
Good, because by the time I'm done with you, you'll have some of your very own.
Look who's talking. The last guy I saw with your build couldn't do anything more aerobic than roll a girl that turned into a blueberry around while singing. After 4 days, nerves are getting a little frayed on that runabout, with Quark especially preoccupied by a buzzing sound. Odo just takes the opportunity to give him more shit. Shit is always on the menu at Odo's, but his tune quickly changes when suddenly even he can hear it. They open up the panel where the sound is coming from, and sure enough, there's a bomb waiting. Obviously not a very good bomb if it gave itself away. A high-pitched buzz near a Ferengi, you might as well put a little Intel sticker on there saying bomb inside. They manage to minimize the damage using the transporter, but they're still pretty messed up and have to crash land on a Class L planet. And the L does not stand for lucky. It basically means that you won't die immediately, but death is assured. To make things worse, at least as far as the frustration with the situation goes, this entire affair only happened because Odo was pretending he knew all along what was going on. Because the Orion Syndicate does not mess around. If he would have admitted it, Quark would have told him, and Odo could have taken more precautions. like doing anything but having an unguarded runabout. To the Orion Syndicate, that's protection roughly on par with escaping the Mafia by wearing a sign saying, "Not a material witness" on it. So after their crash, there's a chance to assess the situation. Conclusion? We're fucked. The crash took out the comm system, and the explosion took out the replicator and most of the emergency supply of field rations. But the good news is the air conditioning seems to be working. Back on the station, the B-plot intrudes with more of the Odd Couple antics. And it seems in addition to the exercise issue, Nog found one of Jake's stories and made a few changes.
I mostly corrected your spelling and grammar.
You changed my words?
Just a few. A preposition here, some punctuation there.
You can't change a writer's words without his permission. That's sacrilege.
You could tell two things with that line. One, it was crafted by a writer. And two, that we are definitely in the realm of science fiction. Back on the loser class planet, Quark says that the comm unit is beyond repair. Or at least, the signal booster in the comm unit is. They can send out a message just fine, but it'll never get through the atmosphere. Of the planet, I mean, not their mutual sense of annoyance. If that could block comm signals, no one on Deep Space Nine could ever send out a message. But Quark has a plan. If the transmitter is at a high enough altitude, it can punch through the atmosphere and call for help. Unfortunately, in this case, the mountain will not come to Mohammed. They're going to have to go out there into that freezing wilderness and climb all the way the hell up there. And to top it off, there's only one survival suit that survived the crash.
How could it be so cold when the sun is shining?
It isn't much of a sun. This isn't much of a planet. And you've got a lot of nerve complaining about being cold when you're the one wearing the jacket.
Well, you agreed to take turns.
Under duress.
They actually improvised that little exchange. When they came out here to film, it was actually very comfortable and looked quite nice. So they felt they better acknowledge it and then have the actors go back to pretending that they're freezing. Odo also has a chance to point out the unique opportunity they had to do this episode. Any other time, Odo could just shapeshift and fly that thing up to the top of the mountain. There'd be help here within the hour. Now that he's stuck as a solid, he can't even adopt a form that's better suited to the cold weather. Never mind make it easier to climb up that mountain with no equipment. And speaking of impossible tasks, it seems that Jake has no idea how to keep their quarters from looking like a complete shithole. I mean, forget Oscar Madison. We're closer to Oscar the Grouch at this point. And Jake refuses to clean it up, claiming to be doing work, but actually playing video games. Now he's really reminding me of my kids. They finally start arguing, and Nog eventually storms out, saying that this isn't going to work. It's certainly not impressing the audience anyway. Back over on Screwed Family Robinson, the pair have pushed on for 3 days, but are hopeful that they'll be high enough in 6 hours, although the effects of starvation may be making Quark high much sooner than that. And just to mock their fate, it turns out that they are actually climbing the wrong mountain. The one they want is on the other side of this one. Really should print those addresses clearer. Quark is, try not to faint with surprise, annoying Odo the entire way down by counting his steps, knowing that every step down is that many steps back up the next mountain before they get back to square one. The only satisfaction Odo gets is knowing that once they're rescued, he's going to haul Quark off to a quick trial and sentencing, only for Quark to point out the obvious to him. Remember that animated series episode, The Pirates of Orion, where the captain was going to blow himself up rather than be captured so that he could testify against their organization? Quark points that out. The Orion Syndicate doesn't need to kill their own. They would sooner kill themselves. Quark's not being brought here as a prisoner. He's a witness. Odo's got this whole thing screwed up. But Odo turns that around on him. Someone like Quark wouldn't be called unless he tried to be a member, and he wouldn't turn down that chance, meaning that the only reason was that he couldn't afford the membership fee. Kind of like the way it is with health clubs.
Well, I guess you're not as successful a businessman as you think you are.
Wow. Nice day to you too, dick.
Which means you spent the last 10 years of your life trying to catch a nobody, with little success, I might add. So you tell me, which one of us is the bigger failure?
All this stuff plays into their relationship nicely. Either one is quite willing to stop and metaphorically rub salt into the wound of the other. yet no snide remarks are offered related to the other's discomfort. Neither one is above kicking the other while he's down, yet neither one is willing to say the slightest thing that will damage the other's morale in their cause. In any other way, it's fine, but on that, there is a firm line that they will not cross. They relish hurting each other, but they would never wound each other. Back on the station, Rom is worried about Nog's behavior too, and talks to Sisko about it.
So while he was asleep, I drew some blood, just to make sure. It's been 8 hours. So far, so good.
I know I've been tempted to do that once or twice myself. So, since this is a sitcom plot, we just have to be thankful they don't paint that line down the center of the room. They're going to have to come up with a wacky solution. But before the wackiness, freezing to death on the side of a mountain. Things are getting worse. The lack of food and the elements are wearing them both down. Quark's going deaf in 1 year, and Quark's complaining finally moves beyond grating for Odo to become intolerable. So they take turns blaming each other for the situation until their adversarial relationship blossoms into open hostility. An angry struggle follows, and Odo falls and breaks his leg. Good thing they didn't bring a phaser, or Quark would have to shoot him now. No, just kidding. Things aren't quite that dark.
Don't you get it? I'm not trying to rescue you. I'm taking you along as emergency rations. If you die, I'm going to eat you.
See, he's not going to kill him for his succulent meat, just use it so it doesn't go to waste. Different species means it's technically not cannibalism. But it's pretty clear from what follows that Quark doesn't want to admit to Odo that he doesn't want to leave him there to die. He goes to a lot of trouble to bring him up that mountain. He falls at one point, finally unable to go any further, so Odo tries to push that communicator thingy up the mountain by himself with a broken leg, just to try to shame Quark into getting up and going on without him. It doesn't work. Even his animosity for Odo is not enough to compel Quark to go on at this point. In the end, it's his sense of Ferengi pride that compels him. Not in himself, but just the thought of all the things that are despicable to his culture that are happening right now, without him around to step in and stop them. And it's in that spirit that Sisko visits Jake and explains that these quarters require 2 occupants. So it's either stay here with Nog or move back in with him. So the 2 friends patch things up. Good. Now that the drama is over and no longer plaguing us with its unanswered questions of where it was going, we can get back to Quark and Odo struggling not to die. Odo leaves a final recording when he thinks that Quark has failed, only to get beamed aboard the Defiant.
If it wasn't for a signal, we never would have found you. Looks like you saved both of your lives.
I was afraid you'd say that.
The post-episode follow-up. Annoying character goes to the odd couple. I know they're supposed to be a counterpoint to the 2 adversaries having to work together by showing 2 friends who could not, but the episode is really not better for their presence. All scores are relative to the series. Final score for the Ascent is 6 out of 10. That's not a slight. This is a fine episode with some great dialogue, and the situation between Odo and Quark is absolutely grand. Nevertheless, the B-plot was complete filler, which diminished the episode. And while this is nevertheless great, there's just a lot of really great DS9 that it's competing with. Still, this remains a fine outing that really explores the complicated relationship that these 2 men have, and best of all, leaves that relationship unchanged despite the adversity they share. They have not grown closer by this experience. They have not gained new respect for each other by this experience. This is something they both want to put far, far behind them.
All hail the Overlord! All hail the Overlord!
You remember back there when I told you I hated you, and you told me you hated me?
Vividly.
I just wanted you to know. I meant every word of it.
So did I.